Today, we'll hear from Molly Bouffard-Briglia, a master gardener and one of my Green American colleagues. She is a certified permaculture designer, master composter, and she is trained as a personal coach by the Institute for Coaching and Positive Psychology. She loves to play in the spaces where art and logic connect and where the earth and the spirit dance together. Please welcome back, Molly.
Thanks, Emma. I'm so glad to be here. This is two of my favorite things, kids and gardens. So I'm so excited to be able to share today. And I'm glad for the reminder about the regenerative practices and the climate victory gardens. I'll try to key into some of those things you might see in my slides as I go through. My name is Molly. I actually work in the Center for Sustainability Solutions at Green America. I'm the Operations and Special Projects Manager there. So this is a great new space for me to be in here with you. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I'm calling in today from Northwest Connecticut, which is the lands of the Shaktakoke tribal nation. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Is it showing correctly?
I can see that it says the next slide and what the next slide is.
Should be on the first slide.
I'm seeing both. I see your first slide and then that's where it says next slide and notes and that sort of thing.
Okay. Start emotion. How about this?
Oh, there we go. That looks good.
Okay. So you'll get to see lots of pictures of my son here, my cute little babe. So I just wanted to share this video to get us into the mind of a child. So I started this little garden for Wade, and he was more interested in the wind chimes. So that's okay. Next slide. All right. So yes, we're here to learn some simple garden-centered tips, tricks, and habits to sow the seeds of a lifelong love of nature in your child. So this is less about very specific ways of gardening and things to do, although I hope at the end that this presentation will inspire you to ask some questions or maybe share some specific ideas. And it's more about kind of the mindset that I've learned and developed over the years. And the important thing to know is that you don't need to have a big garden space or any garden space at all. You can use somebody else's garden. You can go to a farmer's market. Any of these things you do, you can do to a small scale or a large scale. And they're habits that can kind of translate across different ages. And I do want to mention, so this course was inspired by the book How to Raise a Wild Child by Scott Sampson. And so it's about raising a child who's got a connection, a deep connection to nature in general. So I tried to focus this on gardening specifically and kind of take some of those ideas and put them into the lens of gardening. So one of the quotes from the book is, "Gardens are almost magical in their capacity to lift the curtain on our alienation from nature." And so the theory of the book is that continuous, frequent excursions into nature at a local scale and your child seeing you connecting with nature are the biggest indicators that your child will grow up connected with nature and gardening. So that's kind of the focus of this work. And one of the ways that I love to connect with nature is through observation, and specifically through photography. So the pictures here are all from my gardens. And you can see here the biodiversity, the cover. So the ground is covered. I've got sunflowers in here. I've got borage. I've got some wildflowers and weeds. I've got a beautiful butterfly on the bee balm. And over in the bottom right, you can see this must have been the end of the summer because the roses have gone by. So here's my rules. I don't love rules, so, but these are the kind of guiding principles that I live by, and sometimes they're easier to hold on to than others. So the first is, again, inspired by the book I mentioned. It's called Be a Mentor. So it's not about having all the right answers or having the perfect plan or garden design or having a green thumb. It's about just encouraging connection, asking questions, and being a support as the children in your life explore for themselves. So you're just kind of there along for the ride to guide and have fun with them. Another rule is to let your kids help. And this is actually inspired by another book that I've written down later in the presentation, which is called Hunt, Gather, Parent. It's written by a journalist who wanted to understand how to raise more helpful and cooperative children. So one of the things she found was that there are different cultures other than what we're used to in the US, where kids view helping around the house or in the garden as play, and that by letting them help, you're actually developing their habits. So that, like, for example, my son now loves to water the plants because he thinks it's fun. So I'm hoping that in 5 years or 3 years, he can help me truly water all the plants. Although I have to say, it's still surprisingly helpful to have a 2-year-old able to do these little things. And then the third is commit to having fun. So again, really just knowing that you're here to help your kid on their way to connecting with nature, and the way that kids function is through play. So you've got to kind of back up and get into their world. So in other words, ignore all of your adult societally conditioned drives toward speed, cleanliness, striving, and perfectionism, and follow the lead of your children while gently providing more opportunities for learning and connection. So much easier said than done, although kind of once you let yourself go and get in the zone, I do find it gets easier. So this is a quote from the book. And this is a picture of me and my son walking through the grass towards the wild strawberry patch on Midsummer's Day. So it's a very meaningful day. And I just love this memory. And so it says, nothing, absolutely nothing, will spark your child's passion for nature more than your own embodied passion for the natural world. And we could extrapolate this towards gardening. So nothing, absolutely nothing, will spark your child's passion for gardening more than your own embodied passion for gardening. So again, it has nothing to do with whether you have a green thumb, and everything to do with whether you're appreciative of your garden and enjoying it. So to my first point, being a garden mentor. It's less about having a great plan and all the answers, and more about creating excitement and connection. So the word mentor is actually taken from an old Greek myth in which somebody named Mentor guides the hero of the story from the back of the boat, and he just kind of gives these little hints and tips and gentle nudges, all the while the hero of the story is kind of doing his own thing, but there is somebody there with him who's experienced and aware and helping, but not getting in his way. And that is the same attitude that a garden mentor should have. And these are some of the ideas from the Wild Child book that I'd love to talk about, how they relate to gardening. So as a garden mentor, it's not about dragging your kid, kicking and screaming out the door of the garden at like 9 a.m. every day to do weeding, or trying to force them into something they're not really into. But it's about awakening others to their full potential. So each of us is very different, and each child is very different. What motivates them, like some kids are really motivated by observing details, and some kids love to collect specimens, and some kids love to just sit around and daydream. That was me when I was a kid. So it's really about understanding the children in your life and what motivates them, and then can you kind of connect it to the garden and the gardening spaces that you have in your life. And it's regularly marveling at nature's wonders. And isn't this so easy? This is so much better than, you have to plant, basil and make sure you plant it next to your tomatoes or whatever. It's really just like, can you go outside and get excited? Can you see something and say like, oh my gosh, I never saw that before. Are you seeing this? Like, so for example, we're digging out a patio out back behind my house, and it's basically a giant mud pit right now. It's not glamorous, but we were out with our rain boots because we go out every day. And we're just kind of standing in the mud and looking at rocks, because that's what 2-year-olds do. And I saw a moth was like climbing up the rock out of the shadows. And I could tell it was a new moth because he was starting to like open his wings. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're watching this moth dry his wings. He just emerged. And what a special moment that we got to see, because we just happened to be there. And so being a mentor is like, one, making sure we got outside, and two is you're observing and helping to draw the children's attention to interesting things. And when they see you get excited and reverent about something, that gets passed on to them. Another thing is to allow for the mysteries, right? So if you're growing something, for example, I have a beautiful bed of peonies, and they're not blooming this year. I don't think I weeded them early enough. They got damp, and then it was rainy and cold. So it's a real bummer. I'm not exactly sure the specifics of why they're not blooming. But, if my son was older, we might talk about that, and we might just wonder, like, why aren't they blooming? And maybe we could look into it together, or maybe there are some things you might never know. So I don't feel like you have to have all the answers to teach your kids or the kids in your life about gardening. It's about learning together, being able to say like, yeah, the world is a big, wide, wondrous place, and sometimes you don't know why things happen, or what something is, and that's totally fine. That's kind of what makes it magical. So mentors are also active listeners. So it's less about you talking and narrating everything you see and how to do it correctly and when you should do something, and more about again, as conversation unfolds, or if your kid wants to tell you about something, or if you notice like, hey, they're really into XYZ, like what keeps popping into my head is there's this beautiful park where I grew up, and it had this amazing rose garden. And I, as a kid, loved to just go in there and pretend like I was Alice in Wonderland. So, if that's the case, like listen to what your kid's saying, watch what they're doing. Are they like twirling around in a field of flowers? Like go twirl with them and ask them what they're doing. Or are they, like really closely inspecting something, get them a magnifying glass, and again, just like let them explore. And so active listening isn't just literally, are they talking and you're listening? It's you're observing nature and you're also observing your child in nature, and then kind of tweaking the experience based on what you're seeing. And that goes into following the child's lead. So sometimes I go out to the garden intending to do something, and Wade just gets really interested in something else. And I'll be honest, it's sometimes it's frustrating because I'm like, wait, no, I have all these seedlings. I need to transplant them and like put them from here to here. And he just, like wants to go blow dandelion seeds or something. So, like depending on your child's age, you could have more structured time or less, or, sometimes it's about you as an adult saying like, okay, there's time outside with my kid and I'm going to allow it to kind of be more free flowing. And then there might be like, listen, but actually it's a garden and there's some time sensitive stuff. So like that's my responsibility as a grown up to make sure that I have the time to do that. It's not on my kid to like stick to my strict schedule. So there's a little bit of a balance there about when you do things. Again, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be great at growing things. In fact, learning together is a really great way to go about this. Asking provocative, thought-provoking questions. So, like we saw that moth emerging, and for my son, he's 2. So that's, kind of cool enough to just see a moth. But, with older kids, you might try to dive a little deeper, like, where did he come from? We saw him all of a sudden on a rock, but like his cocoon must have been somewhere. Did we disturb it when we were digging out the patio? Was he under the rock the whole time? Or maybe he crawled here from somewhere else. So like, just allow yourself to wonder about things. And as the adult, you have kind of a wider experience, so you can ask bigger questions and see what your kid says. Like, you may be surprised by the answers and the insights that they have. And going along with that is sharing interesting information without being a know-it-all. And like, I struggle with this because I like to be a know-it-all. So I have to really hold myself back. Again, using the moth example, we're watching a moth, something interesting to share could be, hey, that's a moth, not a butterfly. Or that could even be a question. Do you think that this is a moth or a butterfly? Why or why not? Like, how do we know the difference? What is the difference between a moth and a butterfly? And you could be in this like whole other world, and who knows, your kid may like end up obsessed with moths for the next 2 years. And so again, it's like getting out there and having these experiences. You never know what it's going to open up for you and your kids. And you're really working to stretch the edges of your child's understanding and experience of the world, and specifically here of gardening. So like, maybe right now, all your child knows about gardens is, hey, mom and dad have a couple of little pots on the patio to grow herbs. That's what I know about gardening. So then you could try to see how can you take that to the next level of, like maybe where did these come from? Why did these plants grow well here on our patio and some other ones might not? Like what could we cook with these herbs? So you're trying to really just open it up little by little in a way that's interesting for them. And so I wanted to give some specific activities and ideas. So there are 3 main ways to kind of just get in the flow and habit of being a gardener and having gardening as a lifestyle. And again, there's the chores and the calendar and the planning and the planting and doing all of these things. But in terms of creating a relationship with gardening, here's a few things that I have noticed. So one is observation is huge. And that's the first thing I learned in my permaculture design course was You just need to observe and take it in, because any decision you make about your garden is going to depend on what's going on, what's the soil like, what's the weather like, what are the the wild animals like around there, what are your neighbors like, or if you don't have your own gardening space, it could be observing like, where can we go to experience a garden? And it's really important to just observe, and it feels boring or anticlimactic. And I have to tell you, when I did my permaculture design course, I was like, I'm going to get through this so fast. I'm going to do this in like a summer. And I was like, those people who spend a year observing things, like, what do they know? Like, I'm just going to dive right in and get it done. And I just had no choice but to go slowly. And it took me a little over a year to do it, because I realized that you just have to watch what's going on around you. And also it's great, like, we're all so overloaded and kids have so much going on these days that honestly, the chance to just say like, hey, our only job right now is to look at what's going on. That is really good for your nervous system, I think. So one phrase you might hear is called sit spot. And it's really simple. You find a spot and you sit there regularly. And you could try different times of day or different times of year, and you just watch like what kind of insects are on the plants, what new growth has come up, what happened after we had a torrential downpour the other day. Just really be still. And there's something that, kids, I even love doing this. I'm a grown up, but it's called owl eyes. So we're so used to seeing just this band in our vision, but if you open your eyes, all of a sudden you'll realize your peripheral vision, you can see so much more going on. Humans, like, we have really great eyesight. There's a lot we can take in with our senses that we don't normally allow. So this could be a really good example of just sitting, like, you're just staring at your tomato plants, and in your peripheral vision, can you see how the clouds are moving? Can you see how the leaves are fluttering down here? Just get to know your garden space. And that's how you'll start to notice things like, oh no, I think I see like powdery mildew on my plants that wasn't there yesterday. Or what are all these tiny bugs under my leaves? Oh no, I have aphids, so it's practical too. And it is a good, just kind of overall habit. There's something also called fox walking, which is kind of like take off your shoes and walk slowly and deliberately as you can around your garden space and see what you notice. Little kids might even enjoy like crawling around like a fox or a cat. One thing I love to do, and any gardener, I would absolutely, number one recommendation is to keep a calendar. So it could just be a little pocket calendar, and observe like, oh, this is the first day I saw the robins, or this is the day I planted my seeds, and a week later, this is the day they sprouted. Or, like I bought a pepper plant 2 weeks ago, and, 2 months later, like, oh my God, I got my first pepper. So definitely keep a journal if you wanted to like add more detail, or a calendar. And that's something that kids could definitely help with. And it's really fun to look back on it next year. It's a great planning tool. So observing is, if I had to leave you with one thing, is just pay attention. And you, as the garden mentor, paying attention to the garden and to your kid and to yourself. So similarly, you could just wander around. I love this. You love this. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you love to have your coffee or your drink or whatever, and to just like wander around. That's the joy of a garden, right? It's like, just enjoy it. Wander around, take it in. Don't have an agenda. Just see what you notice. And you're aiming to create spontaneous moments of wonder and that sense of timelessness, because that's what your kids will remember. If you want your kids to grow up to be gardeners, it needs to be fun. It needs to feel good. It needs to make an impression. And this is a great way to do that. And then storytelling. So it could be literally asking open-ended questions like, hey, as you're wandering around the garden, you'd be like, what did you notice today? Or it could be really literal, like tell a story about the caterpillar you saw and what is that little caterpillar going to do next? You could read The Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar in the garden, literally tell a story. And one of the things in the book that the author talks about is that it doesn't have to be a good story. It just has to be your story. And the children in your life will love it because it's coming from someone they love. You can also tell stories through art. So like I said, I love to tell stories through photography. You could also sketch, or I have a little nature shelf and we bring in little seasonal trinkets. So like a milkweed pod or a caterpillar cocoon at the end of the winter. I mean, at the end of the fall. Magnifying glass, rocks, just like a little spot to put all the cool things you find. Bouquets of flowers are really fun. So this is the bulk of what I wanted to share with you, is just as a mentor, as the person who's helping to instill the values of gardening into children, it's really important to help them on their own journey, and for you to feel confident that you don't need to know everything, and that just by being there, just by showing them what it looks like to be an adult in a garden doing something, that's huge. That's all you need to do. And anything from there is just like icing on the cake. Like, you got a great harvest, like awesome. That's not the point, but it's good. So I'm just going to move through a couple of pictures to kind of illustrate my point. This is my son in our meadow. We've actually cultivated a meadow. Shouldn't say we've cultivated, we've allowed the meadow to cultivate itself. And because we haven't mowed it in several years, now we've got so many wild strawberries. So he loves to go out there, and they're only there for a few days, the strawberries. And it could be like, maybe you planted a strawberry patch, or you go to a pick your own strawberry farm. Same thing. You don't need to have like a wild meadow. But like, now for him, going to find strawberries is a thing. Now he knows where they come from. He knows you have to kind of like dig through the leaves to get them. And again, he's little, so we were out there and he was just sitting in the field and he was saying, this is fun. We're sitting here. And, maybe older kids won't find that fun, but I don't know about you. I loved to go strawberry picking. I still do. Even as a preteen and a teenager, it's just magical. So especially summertime, if there are pick your own berry farms near you, absolutely go do it. Because also then you get to cook with them or eat them. This is an example of a caterpillar I found. It's not the same caterpillar in both pictures. The one on the right is a monarch that I found on some milkweed I had planted at the end of the summer. And so I filled up a bucket. It was starting to like frost and snow. So I filled up the bucket with the milkweed leaves and pods, and you can see he was eating through it. Unfortunately, he didn't make it and it was too cold. But speaking of like nature tables, I kept his little cocoon and it's in a little special spot. And, now he's just part of my life now. This is just some daffodils in the morning dew. So there's vegetable gardens, but it's also so fun to grow flowers and talk about observing, like just get out at different times of day and look at how the sun reflects on the dew on your plants. Like that's an important thing to do. Like, it's an important thing to do, to go out and look at the sunshine. How's it affecting my plants? One thing to observe is, are your plants, it's called being heliotropic. So they'll move to face the sun as the sun moves through the sky. So these daffodils will slowly start to point the other way as the day goes on. This picture I love. So this is a foxglove. And if you don't know, foxgloves are so called because the word originally was folks glove from Middle English, which was supposed to be like the gloves of the wee folk, the fairies. So this is a fairy plant. And I just thought the way the sun was shining and the way this little lens flare was, to me, like, that's really magical. I was into fairy tales until I was like 20 years old. I still am. So again, an example of I grew this plant from seed. It's a beautiful flower, but there's so much more to it. There's the way the sunlight hits it and the way you can see the little hairs on the leaf and the way the flowers start to open up from the bottom to the top. That's something to notice. Like, how do the flowers open? Do they all open at once? Do they open one at a time? And who knows, maybe you have fairies in your garden. That's a really fun thing. For kids of all ages. I have a niece who's 12 and she still like goes out and makes fairy houses and puts them around. So again, I can't get enough of the magic side of things. And you could also sketch or copy like I did. I had a gardening book and I decided to copy the hosta leaves, and you can see the foxgloves over here. And I pretended that maybe there was a fairy door in the tree trunk. So if you have kind of like an artistically inclined kid or somebody who feels more comfortable, say like drawing on a tablet or something, that's another great thing. Like, how many shapes can you find? What do the ferns look like versus the rhododendrons in the background? What does the bark on a cherry tree look like versus the bark on, a maple tree? So, and again, because gardens could be a vegetable garden or a flower garden, or maybe you've got like a woodland garden. So again, also just thinking creatively about what is a garden? It's all different kinds of gardens. And then this I loved. I just made a garden mandala with at the end of the season with my harvest and the sunflower seeds and the corn and the beans. And I just had fun making kind of an ephemeral piece of art. So that was really, really fun. And they get all the different textures and colors. And I really enjoyed making this. Okay, so the rest of the presentation is a little less intense. So that was the main bulk of it. So let the kids help, even if it gets messy. So this is a quote from the book I was mentioning called Hunt, Gather, Parent. And it says, parents see the mess as an investment. If you encourage the incompetent toddler who really wants to do the dishes now, then over time, they'll turn into the competent 9-year-old who still wants to help and who can really make a difference. And this translates really well to gardening because there's a lot of chores for the gardening. So I mentioned my son loves to water the plants. And so where I have to let go is like, of course, he will overwater the plants or he'll start watering the lawn or the dirt. But the important part is that he feels like he's helping. And, I gently, in the book, she also says, listen, if the kids aren't actually helping and it's just making more work for you, that doesn't count. Like, they need to be actually helping with the chore. So I let him, water to the extent that it makes sense to let him do it, but he's really watering the plants. And to be honest, he can now, he can do that while I do something else and he'll get it all soaked. And so it's really good. And he'll take the watering can and he'll water the seedlings. And again, it sometimes can be a little messy, but as the quote says, I'm seeing it as an investment. So, weeding, thinning things, cutting back, pruning, shoveling, raking. These are all the things that that can be really enjoyable to do together. And it's just a matter of finding the line of what's helpful, truly, and you as the adult kind of stepping back from saying like, oh, but I would do it differently, or just let them do it their way and try to be okay with it. So here's the full title of the book here. It's called Hunt, Gather, Parent. what ancient cultures can teach us about the lost art of raising happy, helpful little humans. So the theory is that if you're always pushing away a kid who wants to help and saying like, oh, but I can do it faster by myself, I can do it better by myself, I can do it cleaner by myself, in the long run, like, then her argument is, well, then kids just learn that it's grown-ups' job to clean and a kid's job to play. And so if children view everything as play, why not help them understand that like all these other things, chores, can be fun. And even for older kids, it's something you can start to integrate. And maybe the garden can be like it's a special place to try this, because gardens are special places. And if you wanted to learn more about that, I'm not a child development expert, but she really goes into a lot of detail in the book about different ages and how to integrate things. So like maybe your kids aren't super into garden chores right now. So that could be a good book to read to get ideas for how to start to weave it in. So she says, the first step to raising helpful kids can be summed up in a single phrase: let them practice. So practice watering the plants, practice weeding, practice raking, practice sowing the seeds. Let them make a mess. So in gardening, that can sometimes translate to, I want to plant the seeds. So Wade loves to help me poke the holes and I put in the seeds. The problem is that sometimes, like after we've planted them, he continues to poke holes. So again, as the adult, knowing your child and where they're at, it's your job to figure out, okay, like where can they help? And then when do I have to like make different arrangements or move the tray out of the way? So here, just a few pictures of my son making a mess. He likes to call it making a muddle. So that's our phrase for it. But he's having a great time. And I have to tell you, it's my favorite. I couldn't care less if he, although I have to say that's not true, because the other day I don't have fences up around all my garden beds. And I had nurtured all of these butterfly milkweed seedlings from seed of all different kinds. And I planted them in a nice bed so they could continue to grow. And he saw me weeding my garden and kind of stepping through the plants. So he just came tromping through and I panicked. I yelled, I picked him up. I was like, oh, get out of there. And he got scared and I got, upset with myself for getting so upset. But I'm like, I'm allowed, right? Like I grew those from seeds. It's important that they stay alive. But that's what I get for letting my kid help me in the garden. So I'm going to put up a fence. That's on me. Again, I'm the grown-up. He's the kid. It's my job to have the boundaries and make it a fun experience for us. But this is an example of just like, maybe it's just a messy looking garden. Like this is not a clean, neat space, but I love it. It's a beautiful colors. It's got colorful rocks that we painted. And it was just a really special place. One of the excellent benefits of gardening with your kids is cooking, which is its own set of messes. But this was a roasted garlic and tomato gazpacho, and Wade loved it. It's a great way to get kids to try new foods if you grow it yourself and cook it. And then the last point is the commit to play. So this is another quote from the book. For me, nature was more verb than noun, more joyous bushwhacking than static learning. And so again, it can be about, teaching what's the name of a plant, when do you plant things, how deep do you put a seed in the ground. Gardening has so many details and they're really important. But if it's not fun, then you won't keep doing it, right? So it has to first and foremost feel good. So just some specific ideas to help you think about this. So committing to fun looks like allowing your garden to get a little unruly. That picture I just showed you. Letting things stay past their prime to see what animals and insects they attract. So maybe you leave your sunflowers up to see if any birds come, and they will love your sunflowers. Be okay if a few plants get overwatered, overtrimmed, or die. I said I'm working on that one. Plant what interests you. So if you don't love something, don't plant it. Like if you don't want to eat vegetables, then plant flowers. Take your time. So there's, give yourself time to go out and do these things and have fun so that you're not like stressed and rushing through things. Or if you don't have a lot of time, then just do less, right? Cut your goal in half. Like if you only have half an hour, then just go out and do something little. It's okay to be flexible with your agenda and your plans. Follow your child's interest. So like sometimes I catch myself, I'm like, no, but this is really interesting. And he's just like doing something completely different. Then follow that interest, and maybe there's a way to like reweave it back into what you were doing. Integrate the garden into the rest of your life. So like cooking is a great example, flower arranging, that kind of thing. And just learn as you go. Again, you don't have to have all the answers at the beginning. So some activities and ideas that I love are having a meal, a tea party, or a mocktail hour, or a picnic in the garden. And maybe you use ingredients from your garden. Create habitats for observing animals and insects. So I've talked about moths, birds, but you could also plant to attract things like snakes could be interesting. A healthy garden has healthy snakes, toads, frogs, snails, whatever. You could go seed or plant shopping together, go to the nursery, even if you don't buy anything. That's one of our favorite places to go walk around. It's just like, look at all the flowers, look at all the plants. Get inspired by your favorite books, movies, or time periods, colors. Like, what do you love that you could start to see in your garden? This is my favorite. Make concoctions from your garden. So it's really easy to make floral essences, simple syrups, infusions, teas, and garnishes are all really easy things to do and so fun. Cook meals with your food or garnish, even if all you have is like a chives plant. That's so fun. Cut it up and put it in your eggs. Give yourself plenty of time. Read or watch interesting books or videos on gardening that inspire you and your kids. So many out there. Flower arranging is so fun. And you can use herbs and vegetables, like get really creative with what you put in there. Play with whatever's out there, dirt, rocks, sticks, leaves, and play games in your garden. So hide and seek, red light, green light, that kind of thing. I Spy. So here's a few pictures of the food, the strawberries. This is something we made, pancakes maybe, with some kind of jam and berries. This is another picture of kind of my harvest table and mandala that I made. You could set up something like that. So maybe at the end of the season, a gratitude table for your harvest. Pickles, so easy to make. The thing on the right here is a calendula oil. So it's basically just shoving a bunch of flowers in olive oil and using it, for skincare. This is me introducing Wade to parsnips when he was a baby, which he liked, and him now putting chives in his eggs. So he loves to cook. And, this is just, I wanted to show different flower arrangements, right? The one on the left, I was really proud of. I thought, this is so beautiful and artistic. And then sometimes it's just as simple as like, I just had time to throw a few daffodils in a vase. So again, doesn't need to be perfect. So in other words, like I said, ignore all your adult, societally conditioned drives toward speed, cleanliness, striving, and perfectionism. Follow the lead of your children while gently providing more opportunities for learning and connection. So that's it. I'd love to hear what you think, what questions, thoughts, or ideas you might have based on your own gardening experiences, spaces near you, your children, your lifestyle, anything you want to know about, specifics maybe. So I will hand it back to Emma and open the floor.
Thank you so much, Molly. That was a beautiful and really thoughtful presentation. You've given us a really nice prompt here, and so I want to give folks a moment to think about it. If you have stories you want to share, please feel free to add those. If you have questions,
Yeah, and it could be if there's specific questions about gardening. So like, I know I talked a lot kind of like big picture ideas, but if now you're like, great, I have all these ideas, but my garden still sucks or something like, happy to answer those kind of questions too.
Yeah, a reminder that Molly is a certified permaculturist.
Yep, and master gardener and master composter. So
Oh, you are a master gardener.
mhm.
I knew that. I'm gonna have to update my bio for you.
That's okay. I see Tina's comment in the chat. They said that made me remember raking leaves with my mom when I was younger and learning to love being outside. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's how my mom was too. I have great nieces and I'd love to get into gardening. So these are wonderful ideas to think about ways to get them going. Yeah, and you could even start with like visiting a garden, I don't know what kind of space you have. Yeah, the Year of the Garden. I'm not sure what that book is about, but one of my favorite aspects of gardening is the observing through the cycles of the year and noticing the wildlife that comes and goes through your garden, because your garden is like a definitive spot with its own goals. You might have it for beauty or for food, but it's so interconnected with everything else that it's really helpful to just notice how does the world interact with your garden, and how does your garden interact with the world. Yeah, a worm farm. So we have a little worm bin, and Wade calls them the squirmy wormies, and he loves to water the worms because they need to be watered. And so talk about like I overshot my objective one day. I was like, I'm gonna make my compost tea today from the worm castings, and I was like, Wade will love this. It's messy, but it turned out to be like a nightmare, way too complicated for a 2-year-old because he just wanted to like throw everything everywhere. So lesson learned.
Just a reminder to everyone to set their chat settings to everyone so that everyone who's here can see your messages. Right now, a lot of them are just coming through to us hosts.
So yeah, I see. I think I'm gonna have to read The Year of the Garden. It weaves generations and cultures. So that sounds right up my alley. Thank you for the suggestion. I see a question: with a very young child, 14 months, who loves to eat everything, what suggestions might you have for making it fun with the need to monitor at the same time? Yeah, you definitely don't want them eating certain things, but I would say maybe plant some stuff like in a specific spot that's okay to eat. There are certain flowers who are totally edible from like root to flower, like dandelions or mint, things that are safe to eat. And yeah, not choking hazards. So maybe don't plant cherry tomatoes. But I said the same thing because I'm like, oh, I love cherry tomatoes, but I don't know if I want to give that to my son right now. So yeah, definitely herbs could be a good thing. Some flowers, sunflowers are great because the seeds are little, you can eat those. Yeah, and I would say too, again, to the person with the young child, like I did with Wade, I made just one spot for him. And hopefully once everything grows in, it's stuff that he can just kind of like take it or leave it. So I grew chamomile, sunflowers, nasturtiums, because those you can eat. Yes, there are many ways to compost. So one of the biggest misconceptions about compost is that you need to have a big steaming pile of stinky stuff that attracts bears and rodents, and that's just not true. One thing you could do is, so first of all, compost shouldn't smell bad. If it does, you're doing something wrong. It should just smell like kind of like earthy. So that's my biggest takeaways. If it's stinky, then you got to rethink what you're doing. It probably has too much water and not enough air. So honestly, some ways that I compost are taking my reusable Keurig cup with the coffee grounds and tapping it outside of my window into the garden. Well, that's very basic. Can't do that with all your food. You could get a worm bin. Those are really fun. You could just Google it and see what pops up. It's just basically a plastic bin that houses some worms. And for me, like, I don't love caterpillars and worms, but I was surprisingly like affectionate towards these worms, and it's really helped me overcome that fear. And they the only thing is they don't eat like a lot, so you can give them like an apple core and it will last a week, you know. So it's not a great way to get rid of a lot of compost. Yeah, if anybody has other resources, feel free to share. You can get like tumblers and bins. I've even seen some like kind of avant-garde products that you can sign up for. I forget what it's called, but like they send you a device and it composts right within it in your kitchen, and you can either use it or like send the material like back to the company, and it's this whole like closed loop system thing. So there's so many ways to do it. And one thing I will say, so you could start a compost pile in your backyard and just put in like leaves and food scraps, and it will turn into compost eventually. If it doesn't get hot though, things like weed seeds or maybe like poison ivy, those kind of things will still stay viable in your compost pile. So you just want to be aware of what you put in it to start with, and then where you end up spreading it, right? Because you don't want to like spread a bunch of weeds. But it's still compost, it's still usable. And what's called hot compost is when the compost pile, it gets hot enough basically by the reactions between the everything you're putting in it. And at that point, it will start to break down weed seeds and other like pathogens and things like that. So, but it could take a little bit more effort. You have to keep it like moist, you have to turn it. So composting is really awesome. And I know everybody talks about how amazing it is, but it can be time intensive. So you kind of just have to find the right version of it that fits your lifestyle and what you're willing to invest time and energy into. Compost towers in the garden, cheap and simple. Yup. Yeah, that's it. It's like what works for you in your lifestyle. Yeah, kitchen composters. Some of them are like electronic, I think, like actually do the work for you. And some are just like a bucket you put on your counter and you put your food scraps in it, and then you like take it out and put it on your compost pile.
We call that a gut bucket in my family.
A gut bucket. Ugh, yeah. Yeah. And those can get gross if you don't empty them fast enough. Which is why sometimes I resort to just dumping my coffee grinds out the window because I'm lazy.
Molly, are you teaching Wade about how to recognize weeds or?
Well, not specifically, but we're just starting to recognize things in general. Like he's really good at spotting robins and spider webs, and he knows the difference between dandelions and other plants. So yeah, we're getting there, but that would be great if we could learn the difference between the weeds and the plants. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm stealth composting. Yeah, I've definitely been known when I lived in the city to like take my bucket and like dump it in the woods somewhere. I don't know if that's what you mean, Kate, but yeah, I've done that. Yeah, it's cool that there's so many people trying to solve this problem, because not everybody has the luxury of a space for composting or the time to do it. And there's so much food waste. So I can tell when I've gotten, for the most part, I get rid of my food waste by composting, or simply just like I live on 3 acres and I have a lot of woodland area, so I'll I have a lot of space for this, but yeah, it's great that so many people are trying to solve the problem, because when I do put stuff in my trash, like I notice it stinks and I just feel so wasteful, because I'm like, this could be turning into good compost somewhere along the line. And if any of you have ever heard of the term compost tea and you're wondering like what the heck that is, that's basically just taking compost that's finished composting. So like you put everything in the compost pile and it starts to break down. And once it's all broken down, that's a compost. So basically what compost tea is you just soak it in water and then you pour the water on your garden or on your plant leaves. And you can get fancy with it and like aerate it and add sugar so the microbes, start growing and stuff. But truly at the end of the day, it's just soaking your compost in water long enough to get the nutrients, but not so long that it starts to get stinky, and using it on your plants. You can put it right on the dirt. You can make it a little goes a long way if you put it on seedlings, so give them a real good boost when they're young. And you can even buy a bag of like compost or worm castings at the garden center and make compost tea with that. So it's not like you have to have your own compost pile and then make compost tea. Like you could buy it and then make the tea. And for example, like a bag of worm castings might be kind of expensive. And if you used the actual castings, they might not go as far. But if you make the tea, it can go further. You can put it on more plants. That's one way to stretch your resources. Transplanting. Is this a one-on-one endeavor? Can 2 or more kiddos and one grown up be viable? Oh yeah, I would say like the more the merrier. They'll do different things or come up with their own brilliant ideas and see what happens. One thing I wanted to say too is that when I was younger, my mom would garden, and she was a very adventurous and resourceful gardener because we didn't have a lot of sunlight. And she just made this beautiful spot out of this kind of like glen in the woods. And she had this beautiful one sunny spot in the garden. And one year, so that was where she planted like all the spectacular plants for this one sunny spot. And my cousin, one year, he was little, he planted accidentally like a squash seed there. And my mom she just let the squash grow and take over her garden. And like, because she was like, he planted it. Like, I want him to see it grow. I want him to see how it works. And so we always remember that as Lewis's squash that year in mom's garden. And you could be like, well, I need boundaries and this is my special garden and I don't want it messed up. But I just always loved that about her, that she was like, you know what? I'm just going to let the squash stay here because I respect the fact that he planted it and I want him to learn how it grows. So you might not know what you get. Yeah. Transplanting. Yeah, that's a great idea, Camille. Transplanting and propagating. That's really fun. That's a great idea, especially if you don't have a lot of space, right? Because like you could take a sprig of mint or tomato. So many things can be transplanted so easily. And you literally just stick it in water and you can start to watch the roots grow. And then you can put it back in the dirt. And there you go. That's a really great suggestion. Or saving your seeds is really fun too. Like save the seeds at the end of the year. Dry your own herbs. So yeah, again, thinking of if you have multiple kids, to me, that's just like more fun you can have for sure.
Molly, I have one more question to round us out here. I know for this webinar, we really focused on being with kids in the garden, but the book that inspired this is about so much more than gardening. Could you maybe just give a quick summary in case folks are interested in it? And
yeah, I don't know if this is probably backwards for you guys, but this is what the cover looks like. It's called How to Raise a Wild Child, The Art and Science of Falling in Love with Nature. And I don't even know if I could summarize it. Like, it was so good. I just highlighted everything and wrote down notes. So it's really, really just about the idea is that the most important takeaway I had was that it's more important to spend quality, consistent time close to home in nature, even if that's just a small backyard or your walk to school. Than it is to feel like you need to go on like big epic adventurous trips, because it's that daily tasks, or like someone in the chat said, yeah, I was raking leaves with my mom. It's those little moments that add up, and all of a sudden like that's just your lifestyle. Like we just go out every day for a walk around the yard in the same direction. And we've gotten to the point where like, and he mentions in the book, like they had the same experience where for us, like now the birds, they don't mind that we're like, they don't stop what they're doing anymore when we walk by, or like we'll just be sitting in our chairs and they'll just like fly right in front of us because they're just used to us. So that's a big part of it too, is like just really getting to know like your space, your area, your local place, because if you want, and we need children to grow up caring about the environment, like it's not just enough to like get fired up about things. It has to come from like a place of real appreciation and feeling like you have a relationship with the world around you. And his point with too is like, we're nature. Like why do we think that we're not? Like we're made up of the same stuff. And so when you start to see how it's all connected, then he talks about like kind of Western culture and some of the disconnects we have. And he talks about the different ways you can experience nature. Like, so is it the local nature? Is it maybe you're going on a bigger excursion? Or is it maybe like nature through your screen? Because like sometimes that's what we have to do to experience nature. So I just thought it was so insightful in so many different ways that that I had to host a class about it.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah.
I thank you for saying that about experiencing through the screen, because that's not something I would have thought of, but so many of us in the Midwest right now are being plagued with the smoke from the Canadian wildfires, and we can't go outside. So
Yeah. And that's another takeaway from this book that like kind of shocked me a little bit. He said, don't talk too much about disasters, while kids are still real little. Like they'll pick up on stuff from school, media, conversations. Like kids are smart, right? But to just kind of start them off their nature connection journey with like, oh, all these animals are going extinct, and all these forests are going extinct, and all this bad stuff is happening. To really, especially like if you're starting with younger kids, to start with like making that connection and feeling the love for nature and the respect for it, so that when they become aware of some of the more negative things, they're coming from a place of like compassion and empowerment instead of fear and anger. And I thought that was really insightful, because you worry about that, right? You're like, there's all this stuff going on. Like, should I even have kids? Now I have a kid. I'm teaching him about nature. Nature might not be here. Like, so it's a really hard question. So I appreciated that point of view, which was like, just, you don't have to teach them all the bad things off the bat. Like you just build up this love and this respect in this relationship, and that will support them when they do learn, about some of the harmful things that are happening.
I love that. Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much for everyone joining us today, especially for staying on for a little extra time. We'll be back with another webinar in a couple months here, and I hope you join us again then. All right, take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.